How's everybody doing today? Today, man, I want to work on these verbal pauses. Today, I have a couple things on my mind. One is, it seems like a lot of people are suffering, like struggling, and it seems like we're in a time where you can no longer run from yourself. Your most authentic, true soul self, the one who has honor, the one who keeps its word, the one who doesn't take lightly even the smallest transgression. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't, tap into the shadow and embrace the shadow side and the quote unquote lower physical self and the, alleged monster side, the dangerous side. Doesn't mean we can't be let's say in control of our full whole energy, holy self, meaning, we're not all good, we're not all bad, we're somewhere in the middle, in the balance. Just like life, the dark could never fully extinguish the light, just like the light could never fully extinguish the dark, because they cannot exist without one another in this plane. This is a place of polarity and duality. Although at the root there is no such thing. From pure consciousness, in this space we perceive these dualities, these extremes, whatever you want to call them, these opposites allegedly that need each other, the yin and the yang Taoism, to exist. And so when I see people struggling and having a hard time with their past, with their choices they've made, with where they're at, they're finally realizing that they are the problem, that they've been the problem, that them not taking accountability, that them not taking responsibility has been the issue their whole life. And it isn't somebody else. There's no one else to blame. It's them. And some people even know that and then still, sit in that space of victim or suffering, choosing to suffer, choosing not to make right their wrongs, make amends. When I was much younger, I grew up in an alcoholic household. My mom, by the time she was 47, passed away from drinking. I didn't know my dad, so on and so on. Well, there's more to that story. I met him. I know who he is. He just doesn't choose to be in my life. We've combated back and forth, whatever. That's a personal, private story that maybe one day I'll get into. I think about that, like, what would be the relevance or the help of sharing my story, and maybe I will. Maybe that would help some people to know you can go through a lot of wild stuff that, on the surface is really rough, tough, horrible stuff, and still do your best to be a noble, kind, morally sound man or woman. So although I see a lot of people in general, especially the internet makes it seem like it's women, and in my experience that's been the case, of not keeping their word, of not having accountability, of not in AA or the the 12 steps programs, it says there are those among us who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves, and they won't be able to stay sober, and true sobriety is a relationship with God, is giving yourself over to God, Jesus, etc., and letting go and letting, surrender to win, surrender to let them be in control, and you just do your best to do as Jesus taught us to do. Help others, spread the message of what saved you, God, and the relationship with that, and, fill your cup with something eternal and everlasting. So if you're suffering, if you're struggling, it's probably you need to look in the mirror. It's probably that you made some pretty poor decisions, hurt some really good people along the way that loved you, wanted to help you, were there for you, took for granted, ran from depth, ran from power, ran from real stuff that, made you uncomfortable, made you feel vulnerable, made you feel afraid to lose them, so on and so on. So if you're struggling, again, it's probably you. It's probably the choices you've made, and the way to deal with that, according to these programs, is to write them down, realize your space in that, what you did, how you could have handled it differently. And now you can't change the past. However, you can seek forgiveness. You can do your best to make amends, meaning in action, do your best to write the sheets, the balance book, write the account. In other words, to balance the books, to, if you did something, kind of selfish to somebody, maybe you can go and do something nice for them, or some way to try to make up for what you did. And if they're not interested in that, you can do that for someone else. So, that being said, I see a lot of struggling, and it really comes from perspective, and it really comes from how we therefore are looking at things and dealing with things. And like I tell my son, for every time you break your word, for every time you lie, every time you don't have honor, every time you don't do what you said you were going to do, every time you put off that task that I asked you, when you see all the stuff I'm doing for you, you're going to feel worse and worse and worse about yourself. And a lot of people, instead of saying, all right, well, let me start digging away at this and start doing, they just run away and want to start over with somebody else. They just want to quit, because it's like it becomes, the molehill turns into a mountain seemingly, when really it would be better for you to stay and even do something, and it would count. Like eventually there's no scorekeeping per se. It's like, okay, I see I haven't been doing these things. Now let me start here. You'll never make up for the past. You'll never change what you didn't do, what you did do. What you can do is start somewhere. So like I've failed or fallen short with my son, and it's like, would it be, and it's like goes through it has, not anymore, has gone through my head of, well, is it better for me to just quit on him and so he doesn't have a dad just because I fall short and mess up and say stupid things sometimes? No, what's better is if I stay and do my best to tell him good things and balance the books and tell him how amazing he is and how special he is and how much I love him and how I'm so grateful for him. Quitting's almost never the answer. Running away is almost never the answer. Then you're literally like hurting somebody over and over, and then you quit on them completely, and you never even take the time to balance the books. And then inside, because we're all connected one way or the other, you feel terrible, and it won't ever go away until you right that wrong, until you make a little until you make amends for that. So, that is one of the things that's been on my mind. I think I'm going to separate this into 2 videos because I want to keep these short, and this is already longer than I intended. So, if you're suffering, start doing the work to write a list of people you've hurt or harmed or done wrong to, and do your best to seek to make amends, and then get out there and, pray and seek a relationship with God, a higher power, etc., and do your best to continue on your journey of now no longer repeating those behaviors. When we seek forgiveness, it's because we're doing our best not to keep acting that same way. So, there's nothing wrong with you. Everybody does this, it seems. Everybody makes mistakes. However, we really underestimate how even the littlest most minor transgression against someone is the same to ourselves. And then it starts slowly building up, and you'll never outrun that. It's always better to just, like my son will keep avoiding schoolwork, for instance, and it builds up. Then I literally sit there and make him do 100 pages in 2 days, and he's like, man, and it only took him, let's say 8 hours total to do all those pages, and he finally realizes, like, what do I keep doing this for? And it just builds up, and the guilt builds up, and then he's all there. You see the relief come over his face and his being and his body, because he finally did the quote unquote right thing, the thing that, keeping his honor. I do a lot for him, so when he doesn't even want to do the bare minimum of things I ask him to do, of course it's going to eat away at him. Like, my dad does all this stuff and I don't really reciprocate, when all he has to do to reciprocate is do the few things I ask him to do. He does the dishes, he vacuums, and he does schoolwork, and I help him as needed, and he's pretty independent about it. However, I recently, again, caught him not doing his schoolwork, playing around, and that's fine. I actually encourage his imagination. It's just at times he does need to bear down, and that isn't really about the schoolwork. It's about doing things we don't always want to do. It's pushing ourselves into new spaces, growing, getting stronger, seeing that we are capable of more than we think we are. That's the lesson in doing things we don't want to do, whether it's school, whether it's learning to tie knots so you can survive in the wilderness and trap and fish. It's any of these uncomfortable spaces of things that don't come to us easy, that we have to work for, that aren't necessarily comfortable. Trees grow into new spaces constantly, or the other option is they're dying. So you're either growing or you're dying. And if you want to feel like you're growing, then you need to be facing these things and pushing yourself through these uncomfortable spaces, through these growing pains, through the struggles, the tough times, the pains, etc., etc. So don't run, don't avoid. if you've been screwing up for a while, like stand your ground and say, okay, well, today I'm starting here and I'm going to start, doing something nice every day, maybe a couple times a day for the one that's been there for me, or somebody who you've abandoned or hurt, that was there for you, and you just felt like you couldn't keep up with them, and so you gave up or ran or whatever. Like, if you're being honest with yourself, then you got to start somewhere, okay? And maybe they're not going to reciprocate. You still have to start somewhere, because this is about you and you living in honor with yourself and being honest. Like, did you really, make an effort? Did you really own your stuff? Did you really seek forgiveness? Are you really doing what it takes to show that you know what you did or what you've been doing or whatever, So don't try to flip the script. Don't try to play the blame game. Take full accountability and responsibility for the situation and do your best to make it right, and stop making up stories in your head about how it's everybody else, because it isn't, it's you. I love you all. thelivingmysterychurch.org. Coming right back at you with another video. I'm just breaking it into 2 to keep it short, plus my upload speed sucks. So, thelivingmysterychurch.org. Hit me up, hit the like button, subscribe. If I get to 50 subscribers, I guess I get to start going live and uploading more often, so that would be cool. I'd appreciate that. So even if you turn off all notifications, don't ever watch anything, I could just use that so I can start doing lives and stuff, which I'd like to do, because I basically do that anyway, but I have to upload later rather than while I'm talking, and I would rather do that. So if it gets there, gets there. If not, this is fine too. I love you all. Have a great day, and keep doing your best and keep growing and keep seeking to be better. Thank you.